Good evening, everyone. We are truly excited for this day, for such an important conversation that we should be having today. As we look around this world and this global pandemic that has occurred, it is so often that a few of expertise come together. And so welcome to the conversation between us about us. It is our prayer that you walk away with more information and you will be better prepared as you leave this space. And so without further ado, let's welcome Senator Cory Booker.
Hello, Black America, and people who pay attention to what Black folks.
Hi, it's Cory Booker. I want to thank the Kaiser Family Foundation, the Black Coalition Against COVID, and the Faith in New Jersey, this extraordinary organization as well, for all that you are all doing in advancing this conversation into action. We must get our community vaccinated. We know that all adults now are eligible, but we still have too much of a gap in the communities that are most vulnerable to this horrific pandemic. Black and brown communities. Faith communities have a platform, one based upon trust, one based upon long, deep roots in our communities. Indeed, when it comes to issues of justice, when it comes to issues of compassion and care, it has been our faith communities from the days of slavery until now that have helped to source, nurture, nourish, and protect us. Now more than ever, we need these institutions to lead in closing the vaccination gap. I pledge to you as a senator that I will continue to do everything I can to support this urgent mission. Growing up in the Black church, I know the power, indeed, as the good book even says, I can do all things. We can do all things through the strength we find in our faith and our commitment to being a more beloved community. Thank you all for your righteousness, steadfastness, for knowing that faith without works is dead, and for being light workers in a time that is still too dark. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Up next, why are we here? We will have the president of our board of directors, Reverend Hayward Wiggins.
Good evening to all, to Senator Booker and staff, to the panelists, present clergy and friends. On behalf of our executive director, Charlene Walker, and staff and members of Faith in New Jersey, I also welcome you to our conversation between us and about us. Faith in New Jersey, for those who may not know, is a multi-faith and multiracial network of faith leaders and faith communities working together to protect religious beliefs, liberties, and advance in immigration and racial, economic, human justice agenda at the local, state, and federal levels. Faith in New Jersey's mission is to develop grassroots community leaders, analyze the policies that shape our communities, and mobilize faith voices and faith voters to effectively act on the prophetic call to build the beloved community. This beloved community has a right to have attention paid to it in the area of health and welfare. Excuse me. This community, underserved and often neglected, ought to have the right to have attention paid to it, to make sure that all have the opportunity to live healthy and well in our society. Our work calls on us to make sure that all avenues are traveled and pursued, in making sure that we can relay to those we love so that they can live long and healthy lives. We feel that this is a time for us to come together and have a conversation and try to allay some of the fears that may be running around in our communities. and let them know that our ultimate desire is for them to be healthy and to live long and prosperous lives. And so we come together this evening to make sure that what we say and hopefully will give people comfort, hopefully will give people an idea in our communities, our beloved communities, the desire to make sure that they put themselves in a position so that they can take care of their families and be well. This is of the utmost importance for us in Faith in New Jersey. And so we welcome you again to the conversation between us and about us. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, President Wiggins. Now we will have an additional video by Mr. Bell.
Hello, Black America, and people who pay attention to what Black folks are doing. My name's W. Kamau Bell. There's good news out there. There's a COVID-19 vaccine. Yay! But the bad news is, as Black folks, it's hard to trust what's going on. So what do? Well, we turn to people we can trust, Black folks. But not just your uncle at the cookout. No. Actually, not him at all. I'm talking about Black scientists, Black doctors, and Black nurses. Okay, first question. The vaccine happened fast, like super fast, like Usain Bolt headed to the bathroom fast. Is that something we should be concerned about?
Having an emergency authorization for these medications was critical, but that doesn't mean any steps were cut.
Anything where money could be traded off for time, that was happening. Like, money was no object.
They still have all of the rigor that they use for approving any vaccine. So we can feel confident that the science is still there.
The messenger RNA technology has been in development for the last 12 years. So even though you hear this thing about warp speed, believe me, that was not warp speed.
And I think the data is real. It suggests it's highly effective.
About a week or so after your second dose, the people who had gotten the placebo or who didn't get the true vaccine, their rates of coronavirus continued to climb, whereas the people who had gotten the vaccine, it just flattened out.
And what about side effects?
Soreness from the injection site.
I had a little bit of arm soreness.
Arm sore? Is that a side effect? My arm's sore right now.
The common things, soreness at the injection site, headache, fever, maybe a swollen lymph nodes.
The second dose is when there's more common, those systemic side effects.
Is this like one of those pharmaceutical commercials where at the end they talk real fast about the side effects and it's like, you're also gonna get hair from your eyeballs and vampirism?
My sister texted me the second day after I got the first vaccine, and I remember she was like, "Are you a zombie yet?" And we just laughed, like, "No, I'm not."
So the big answer is no. And the reason being is we are not injecting the virus into your body. The vaccine is training your body.
It is making those antibodies to fight that disease. So I view it as a positive thing.
So here's a question from everybody's uncle, and since I'm an uncle, it's a question from me too. Are the drug companies just trying to get rich off this?
The drug companies will certainly get rich.
Oh, drug companies are always trying to get rich, but that's not the point, right?
That is really how a lot of our innovation happens. That is why the drug companies will spend millions upon millions in research.
Were Black and brown people a part of this process, or was it only like white folks, like NASCAR white folks?
The trials were intentionally broad and inclusive.
Yeah, Black and brown folks have been recruited for the clinical trials.
We have ensured that each of the 4 historically Black medical schools, that we are all vaccine trial sites.
So here's the big question. How much are you charging us for this vaccine?
Right now, getting vaccinated is free.
Free?
Yes, it's free.
Like free.
It will be free.
Like not even free 99.
We have not charged anyone.
Okay, should I be suspicious that you aren't charging us?
No, because there are some things that the government invests in that for the good of the people.
Taxpayers like you and I contributed to the development of these vaccines.
What if I'm not worried about getting COVID-19?
Like you could say, I never had smallpox, I've never had tetanus, why do I need the shot? That's why we give vaccines. Vaccines are prevention.
I pretty much tell people you're gonna be exposed some kind of way, right? So you better be ready to fight.
And what about you? Will you?
I got my first dose about 3 weeks ago.
I have not gotten the vaccine yet, but rest assured, I'm anxiously waiting.
I definitely will be getting vaccinated when my turn comes.
I was scared getting it, and then after I got it, I was like, oh, well, I guess it wasn't that bad.
When the vaccine went in, I felt this intense amount of honor.
Like a lot of people, I like to get my medical information from bizarre, dark corners of the internet that haven't been vetted. Is that a good idea?
Oh dear.
Please do not continue to do that.
That is definitely not a good idea.
Unfortunately, on the internet, pretty much anyone can post anything.
There are no microchips. There's no stealing of your DNA. No, none of that is happening.
Thank you, doctors. All right, I'll let you get back to work. And thank you for allowing me to ask you these questions. But before you go, just want to let you know, your parents are super proud of you. It's all they can talk about.
Okay, all right. Hey, listen, we are excited for this wonderful opportunity to share in this wonderful dialogue, a conversation between us and about us. Let's see who's in the room. Let's start off with Dr. Cheryl Heron, Emory School of Medicine. She's on the Zoom. Give us a little wave there. All right. The Reverend Gregory Jackson, the president of Lock Carey, pastor emeritus of Mount Olive Baptist Church in Hackensack, New Jersey. Give us a little wave. All right, welcome, welcome. Mrs. Lynn Algrent, vice president of planning, development, and communications, Greater Bergen Community Action, Paramus, New Jersey. All right. The Reverend Dr. Edward Harper, senior lead pastor, Macedonia Baptist Church, Lakehurst, New Jersey. All right. The Reverend Tommy Miles, senior pastor, another Macedonia Baptist Church in Neptune, New Jersey. Okay, let's have a conversation. Let's start off with Dr. Cheryl. Dr. Cheryl, let's start this off. What are the statistics of COVID-19 cases and the mortality rate in the Black community?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to this esteemed panelists and, to Senator Booker and to the foundation and all of us who are trying to get the word out. I might be in Atlanta, but for those who may not know, I was raised right next door in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm a strong woman of faith. And so this conversation that we are having is extremely important to me. Specifically, as we think about the risk of COVID-19 infection, hospitalization, and death by race and ethnicity, we have to understand that the data is real. We know that if you go to the CDC website and you look up the information as early as last week, June 17th, they noted that Black or African-American non-Hispanic persons were 2 times as likely to die from COVID-19. Our Latino, Latinx brothers and sisters, 2.3 times more likely to die. And interestingly, our American Indian, non-Hispanic persons, 2.4 times more likely to die. And death is one piece of the equation when you think about the statistics for hospitalization, which is why we're also talking about vaccination. Black or African Americans are almost 3 times more likely to be hospitalized because of COVID. And Latina, Hispanic people, 2.8 times more likely, and American Indian or non-Hispanic persons or Alaska Native, 3.3 times more likely. So when we think about the data, the impact of what we are speaking about related to hospitalization, infection, and death by race and ethnicity, we can surely see why we need to have this conversation to continue to educate our communities of the reasons and the rationale for why vaccinations are very much important. Thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Here's another question that is so profound. This goes to Ms. Lynn Algrent. What are some of the trends and themes have you seen in how COVID-19 has affected Afro-American people in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, thank you. It's such an honor to be here with all of you, both on the screen and out there in New Jersey, listening to this conversation. If you go to the New Jersey COVID-19 dashboard, and it's right on the internet, you can look up your county, you can look up your town. And here's what I've been seeing as I've been watching this over the last few months, as we've been working with our COVID vaccine equity team and trying to make sure that shots and appointments were accessible to people in communities of color. When I look at various towns, what I see is that the virus does not discriminate, right? The infection rates, you look at the population in that community and you look at who got infected in that community, the virus does not discriminate, but the disease does, right? And Dr. Heron just told us how much harder on our communities the disease has been. And I think it's really important to understand that. The virus, again, it's a virus, but because of all of the other kinds of challenges that our communities have faced around environmentalism, around health access, it hits our community harder. And that's why we have to hit back harder. Look up your town and see what's been happening in your town. And you will see, they show by age, they show by race, and you will see in every case, Black and Brown communities, Native American communities are hit harder by the disease right here in New Jersey than other communities. And so we have to fight back.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Reverend Jackson, so far tonight during this conversation, any thoughts on special needs population in New Jersey?
Well, just a thought of using our circle of influence to make sure that we can reach out to people of color or persons with special needs that go across racial boards. And I would think that many of those persons would certainly need the vaccine equally as well as other persons, and probably more so because they're fighting other kind of conditions.
Awesome, awesome. Anybody else would like to chime in? Reverend Harper, Dr. Harper? You're on mute. You're on mute. Just unmute, yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we know that Black and Brown people, especially Black people, have a long history of distrust that goes back to the Tuskegee experience. And that's a major reason that a lot of people don't trust today. But we have to continue to emphasize the fact that there are so many people who are CDC people who are taking this vaccine, so there's no reason that they should doubt it. And they don't want the national people not trying to kill themselves, they're not trying to commit genocide or anything like that. So we have to say, if all of these people trust it, why don't we? We are doing it for ourselves. If we don't do it, we're hurting ourselves.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So what are some of the steps? Where can the church kind of come together here in New Jersey or just around the country? What are some of the steps that we should share tonight during this conversation to convince more people to get vaccinated? What are some of the steps?
I think it starts with the pastor and clergy persons in terms of the church community, that we put ourselves out there as leaders in terms of taking the vaccine and encouraging our members in our congregation to do so. And then networking with other organizations in our community. Not everybody go to church. And so I think we need to reach out to barbershops and bars and other places, beyond our circle of influence, to make sure, to the best of our ability, that people would get the vaccine.
That's awesome. Barbershops, wow, beauty shops, nail salons. Who would ever thought? But it's a great place.
Don't forget bars. You left that out. So
And and bars. Awesome. Awesome. Anyone else? Reverend Miles, you're in the Jersey Shore area. What are some of the steps that Monmouth County is taking to convince the community to get vaccinated?
Thank you, Reverend Sutton. I want to add on to actually with what Reverend Jackson just said. I want to add to his statement, and the congregation is a good place for the pastor to begin. I often say that the church is made up of multiple circles, that there are many circles within every congregation, and everyone is part of a circle. I won't call it a clique, but a circle. And everyone has influence in that circle. And there are circles that we are part of within the congregation and outside of the congregation. And I think it's important that we use our platform as pastors to share our story. For me, I'm honored to be a part of this conversation tonight, because this is personal for me this evening, because my father passed from this virus just a few days before Christmas. And so it's only been about 6 months since he transitioned. And so this is personal for me. I was reluctant myself to get the vaccine initially, but seeing how my father went through and what he suffered, and recognizing the importance of the people in our community getting the vaccine, I'm using my platform to get the message out. And sometimes, if we could, since we're talking church, is nothing more powerful than a personal testimony.
Amen.
That's what we do in the church, tell your story.
Right.
And I believe that is a place to begin.
Awesome. Awesome. This is great information to share and exchange, telling your story. So this is for us and about us. Many employers are mandating employees to get COVID vaccine, which has raised concerns for workers. Do employers have the authority to require this? I want to ask Dr. Cheryl, what are her thoughts? What are the benefits are there for such a requirement?
Well, let's start in the beginning, where there is no CDC mandate that you have to take the vaccine. Right?
Okay.
However, there are some organizations that will suggest and state that they are moving towards mandating the vaccine, simply because it's about safety and protection for the greater good of all. And if you are not going to mandate it, then you have to think about, what are your contingencies? Are you going to test people weekly to ensure that they have a negative COVID test? Which, I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of having something stuck up my nose every week in the most uncomfortable of ways, having had several COVID tests, as I'm sure you all have had as well. And so I understand the ethical questions behind this, but I would also ask people about when they grew up, when we had to get shots for measles, mumps, and rubella. And when we have eradicated diseases based on the protection afforded us by having these vaccinations, like the flu vaccine, right? So we have to think and look historically at what does a mandate really say or suggest versus what it's trying to ensure and actualize for the greater good for all people. And then the bigger question really comes into, why, if you're concerned about the word mandate, people just don't like to be mandated to do anything. We have to do a deeper dive to understand, what are the concerns of the people? What are their fears around the vaccine? Is there something that might not have been communicated clearly or factually? And we've started to talk about where people are getting information. And as church and leaders of the church who are trusted members, I love that word, trust, in the community. The community should look to you all in the faith community, appreciate and understand, and say, well, okay, I'm not into this mandate, but let's recenter on the cause and what we're trying to accomplish, which is to ensure Black and Brown people are surviving and thriving. And I'm sorry to hear about your father, Reverend Miles, and I'm sure everyone has their own story to tell, but we should really look centered internally to ask, really, what does that really mean in terms of the greater good for our communities?
Ms. Lynn?
I'd like to just add, I want to add two things. So my testimony is not a tragic one, and I'm so very sorry for your loss, Reverend Miles. In my family, my husband was a trained scientist, but he's a high school principal. But in my family, we were incredibly, incredibly careful, and we were also incredibly lucky. Right. And I know lots of people who were incredibly careful, but were not lucky. And I think that we have to think about this as we go forward. The pandemic is not over, right? And people are not being as careful anymore, right? Because we're kind of getting this feeling like it is over. The weather's nice, we're outside more, lots of people have been vaccinated, states are opening up, and people are not being as careful as they should have, as they should be if they are unvaccinated. If you are unvaccinated, you are still in March 2020, you are still in September 2020, you are still in November 2020. Those of us who are vaccinated, we're moving on to 2021. But if you are unvaccinated, the world is as dangerous to you today as it was in the worst of times over the past year. And the other thing that I want to make sure that we remember, so many of us were being really, really careful to protect our elders, right? My mom's 94. And I took 2 weeks, I worked from everywhere, hotels, airports, all these things to be able to see her, but to be able to see her safely. Mm-hmm. Now we adults, we have to protect the young ones. Children under 12 can't get the vaccine yet. And so we adults, we 12 and up, we need to be vaccinated so that we can protect the young ones the same way last year we protected our elders, often at great sadness, not going to see them, right? And not being able to hug them and love them. Well, we can't do that with kids. We got to see them and love them and hug them and give them baths. And so we need to protect them. And the way that we do that is through this vaccine.
Wow. Awesome. Let me thank you, Ms. Lynn. Let me go back and say to Reverend Tommy Miles, I'm sorry for your loss of your dad. In this discussion tonight, one of the things that we really wanted to make sure, the safety and how do we move forward. On the news, this new variant, where are we in our churches in this discussion when you hear variants? Pastor, I've been vaccinated already, but I'm a little leery about this variant. So they go back to March 2020. So how do we kind of create some sort of understanding of safety with this new variant? Anybody like to start on that?
I would like to say that we have to continue to use caution. Just because we have had the vaccine does not mean that we still cannot spread it. I know of people, a couple, even in my church, where they have had the vaccine and 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they found out that they have still been spreading it to somebody else. So that's why it's so important that we continue to use caution. Just because you have the vaccine does not mean that you cannot still spread it.
That's great. That's great, Dr. Harper.
I think us, as it relates to pastors and the new variants out there, first of all, just be honest and tell the truth. First of all, we're not doctors. We don't know what this new variant is going to do, but to the best of our knowledge, we still are encouraging people to take the vaccine. Stay tuned for what is coming down the pike. There may be some other kind of information that we might have to adjust in a year from now, but right now, just be honest and tell the truth, and don't try to put yourself out there as someone that knows more than we do not know. I would also just encourage, as Pastor Miles said, you know, we have these small circles in our congregation. Sometimes they have more influence on those people in that circle than we may have at the top. So it's not just to pastor, but also find other people who are the leaders in those small circle of influence that can have impact on that smaller group. And sometimes it's not necessarily the president of the group. Sometimes it's some other person in that group that people listen to. And if you can get that person to take the shot, you're hit home run.
Awesome. That's a great point. Dr. Cheryl?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for our listeners about what the vaccine is really intended to do. It's intended to prevent you from being critically ill and hospitalized or dying. There's a recent release that came out that the people who are being hospitalized and are dying have not been vaccinated. And we know that when we think about a variant, it's just simply a mutation of a previously existing virus. And so as you consider taking the vaccine, while we're still collecting the evidence around what that means, it is still mitigating and decreasing the likelihood that you will get critically ill and or die. And so one, one said, well, what about this? What about that? Yes, variants are going to happen the more and more we get exposed to and see different things. The real crux of this, though, with the vaccine is to imminently prevent critical illness, hospitalizations, and death. And so we want to be clear about that as people are coming up with these sorts of questions, which are great ones. And I encourage questions, because if questions means that we can get to the answers for people to feel comfortable about getting their vaccines, ask away, ask the questions, seek the information you need to get to that level of comfort, to be able to keep yourself and your families and your communities safe. Thank you.
Awesome. Anyone else like to chime in on that?
Just that it's a global pandemic, as part of Lot Carey, we're fighting this pandemic, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And Lynn and I here in Bergen County, early on, we spent a lot of time in terms of trying to ensure that people of color got access to the vaccine. And, that's, I think, going pretty well now. People, if they want the vaccine, I think they can get the vaccine. Certainly they can here in Bergen County. But around the world, that's a different story.
Okay.
So we're fighting that fight in South Africa and Zimbabwe and other places around the world, trying to make sure that our people are vaccinated.
So in other words, what you're saying, Reverend Jackson, was there equity in the beginning when it was time for Black and Brown communities to get vaccinated? Was there enough vaccines to go around? It seemed like there was no equity. Was that the case?
I think that was the case here. I don't know about other places. It certainly was the case here. Early on, we really had to advocate and fight, etc., to make sure that people, because early on, there's a large number of people who wanted a vaccine in the African-American community, particularly seniors. They were lined up. They were making phone calls. How do I get this vaccine? Right. There was I would say honestly, though, early on, there were more people across the board who wanted the vaccine, which therefore made it more difficult for persons of color to get the vaccine.
Wow. So from what I'm hearing, at one point, all you needed was a name and you were good to go. Then it kind of switched a little bit. Then you needed a Gmail account. You needed your birthday. It just kept changing over time, because we know seniors 60 or 70 over, a lot of times they don't check email. They're not privy to that type of technology. So it kind of pushed them in a very difficult spot. So how do we manage to just move forward now? Anybody care to just jump on that?
Lynn?
Well, I'll just say, both from the federal government and from the state government, every other word in the vaccine distribution plans was equitable, all of this, right? But what we were seeing on the ground is that was a lot of language and not a lot of action, right? It was survival of the digital fittest.
Wow.
If you weren't fast on the computer, if you couldn't set up 5 computers and refresh, you couldn't get an appointment.
Wow.
And so that left a lot of folks in our community waiting, right? And a lot of our seniors waiting. So we were able to turn that around with a relationship and strong arming some of the local hospitals to give us appointments that we could then give to pastors to make sure that their congregations were getting vaccinated. So, but that was the low-hanging fruit folks, right? Those were the folks who wanted the vaccine.
Okay.
Now we are very, very lucky in the United States of America, and Reverend Jackson, I'm so glad you talked about the rest of the world, right? That right now we have more than enough vaccine. We have more vaccine than we have people who are willing to get the shot. Wow. And yet the United States of America is not going to start sending vaccine around the world until we reach our numbers. And so that means that our brothers and sisters in Africa and South America are going to have a harder time getting access to it because we're dilly-dallying here in the United States, right? So part of this is, and I guess I want to say that we're still out there educating, we're still advocating, we're still making sure that vaccine is available in people's neighborhoods and in safe places like the church or the community center. We're working very hard to make sure that vaccinators do not ask so much information that they frighten our undocumented brothers and sisters from getting the vaccine. There's still a lot of equity work that needs to be done and equity education that needs to be done. But for anybody watching this who's sort of on the fence, I don't know, maybe I'll wait a little while and see what's going to happen. It's the time is really now. The time is really now, and it is so important. And again, I think about how desperately I want all kids to be able to go back to school in September in a normal way. And the best way for us to do that, right? The best way for us to do that is for all of us who are able to get the vaccine to do it, so that come September, kids can walk into school and parents can be confident that that school will be a safe place for their kids to go and learn.
That's awesome. That's awesome. This has been an amazing conversation with some key important individuals such as yourself who are out there on the ground really kind of doing the work. And so we applaud you for keeping and making sure that vaccinations are important in our community. But I just want to leave this last question before we depart from this wonderful conversation. When it comes to health and wellness in the Black and Brown community, what is your key thing that you want the listeners to hear? And we realize that we lost some loved ones in this pandemic, but how do we stay well and how do we stay healthy as the church going forward? And I'll start with our president of Lock Carry, Reverend Gregory Jackson.
Well, I would say it's a balance between it's trusting the science, yes, but don't forget to trust God. Don't forget that prayer still works. I think that it's a combination of praying. And I have to also say, I have run into a few pastors who have been hesitant, and some who I know have not taken the vaccine. But, I am still praying for them and encouraging them. And I talk to them all the time. And, some of them are older than I am. And they tell me, well, I'm going to wait a while. And I said, what you waiting for? You 70 and 80 years old, So, and then I share my own testimony, and I certainly pray for Reverend Miles and the loss of his father. But I lost my pastor as well as his wife. I have lost pastors in the Lot Carry Network all over our country. I've lost a few that I know of in various countries around the world. I don't really know. I know that, in various places, it's really difficult. But, that kind of network, and be hopeful, it's a tough time, but we still want to be hopeful of our people. And we're grateful for telling the story about, having been vaccinated, and you can hug your grandkids again. You can spend time with your those kind of things I think are helpful.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. All right. Any last thoughts, Miss Lynn?
I would like to encourage everybody to still wear a mask, even though you've been vaccinated, because we don't know how long that this is going to last. And there are some people around you who might claim that they've been vaccinated, they have not. So please continue to wear a mask.
Okay.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Harper. All right.
I'd also like to add to that, what you're doing tonight is necessary. I want to applaud you for having this conversation tonight, having people who look like us, appealing to people like us is important to do. It is critically important to have individuals, people of color, having this kind of conversation. I know I have 2 younger daughters, and they're part of that generation who believes that a lot of things such as this is part of a government conspiracy. And so they don't believe that the vaccine is something that will help them or benefit them. And so I just believe having a conversation such as this with people of color, those individuals who are experts in their fields, and even for myself, I've had the vaccine, but I feel even more confident that I did the right thing now, just by being a part of this conversation and hearing different individuals saying what they shared on this live tonight. So I want to say, if you could continue to do even what you've done tonight, I believe that someone's, not just someone, I believe many people have been helped tonight, and you've helped push some people over the fence as to what they were going to do. Some were undecided, but I really do believe as a result of tonight that some are going to make a decision or made up their mind, I'm going to get the vaccine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Reverend Miles.
Thank you, Dr. Harper and Reverend Harper, too, for talking about wearing masks. Continuing to wear a mask even when you're vaccinated. I always wear my mask when I go into the grocery store or another place, and I'm doing it as a courtesy to the folks who are working there, right? I'm going to be in the store for 15 minutes and I'm going to be out, but they're going to be there all day. So thank you for saying that. The last word that I just want to say, Greater Bergen Community Action is an anti-poverty organization. And we exist to try to eradicate the conditions and circumstances of poverty in communities. And right now, health is wealth. Health is wealth. There is no economic opportunity if you're not well. There are no good jobs if we're not well. And so for us, for Greater Bergen, it may seem, we're not a health organization, and yet we cannot alleviate poverty. We cannot attack social justice issues if we're not healthy. And so that's why we're fighting so hard to make sure that folks get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. May I add one other thing that I think that's helpful for the church? I think that, vaccines, we have the vaccines there and we're fighting to get everybody vaccinated. But that's helping us to be well, but in the biblical sense, I do not think it's enough because we are still not whole. We've lost so many people over these last year and a half. And as churches come, this virtual stuff is okay, but for me, I'm tired of it. I want to be in a congregation, in a community where people can hug, And then that's the first step. The other step is to recognize and to acknowledge the death of so many people that we were not able to mourn sufficiently. And that's a part of the ministry that I think that the church community is just got to do something. Now I'm a retired guy and I don't have a congregation, but I'm encouraging you because I think that would be so helpful to all of those persons who died and those families did not get a chance to grieve in the congregation, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Reverend Jackson. Dr. Cheryl, please.
Yes, and again, I amplify both you, Lynn, and Reverend Jackson, but I also want to underscore while we're talking about people who have died or been critically ill, we haven't even begun to touch on people who have long COVID and who the millions of people who've been infected but not on the quote radar in terms of the sequelae and the long-term effects of what contracting COVID is going to lead to, from all the things that infect and affect you from head to toe, the brain fog, the palpitations, the anxiety, the kidney disease, the pulmonary disease. We haven't even begun to really scratch that surface when you think about impact and what I will dare say, see in the very near future as we are trying to resume the business of getting together and say, well, I didn't get that sick. Well, there are people who had COVID and they were asymptomatic. However, they have long-term sequelae that has impacted their health and ability to function going forward. And so I think that we're at the tip of the iceberg, quite frankly, of what we have seen and will continue to see going forward. And the faith community is going to have to be prepared for that piece of the equation as we build community and wrap our arms around people who are not going to be able to function just under the surface, perhaps not dying, but enough under the surface to have long-term outcomes in their lives. That's going to be, quite frankly, for generations. So I just wanted to encourage you to have more of these webinars because the mental health sequelae and underbelly of COVID is just beginning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cheryl. We truly are thankful. We're excited for all the panelists. We want to give you, each and every one, a hand for taking the time, sharing your experiences and your thought, and to have this conversation for us and by us. And so as the moderator of this great conversation, I thank you so much for this wonderful and poignant introduction of where we are and where we need to go going forward. It's amazing. And so continue to keep doing the work. At this time, we'll have our closing remarks by our president of our board of directors, Reverend Wiggins, and he'll also give us our benediction.
Well, I am totally blown away by your input, and thank you, Reverend DeQuinton, for moderating us in such a fine fashion this evening and opening this door of opportunity for us to talk about this disease that has been running rampant. And it just made me reflect a little bit, because as I shared with Reverend DeQuinton, I lost my mother on December 28th, and her and I had COVID at the same time. My mother was 90 in Paris, but I survived after a long battle. And so it's so important for us to talk about this and get this out here. And I put in the chat about how the long-term effects is something that hasn't been talked about much. Now, so thank you, Dr. Cheryl, for bringing that up. I'm dealing with some of that even myself. Affects your endocrine system. But we are truly proud and truly happy for you joining us tonight. And so we would ask that you would keep up the fight, keep working hard. We're going to do the same thing at Faith in New Jersey, keep working hard to make sure that our communities become healthy and well, and make sure that those who want to live can live and have opportunity to do so. So if all hearts and minds are clear, as we say in church, right, we can ask God's blessings upon our time.
Amen.
God in heaven, we ask that you bless us for the things that we seek to do. We ask you that you would keep us in the efforts that we're trying to put forth to save our communities. Folks who don't know that they even need to be saved. Help us to have the right words to say and to share to those who may be sitting on the fence and not understanding the need that they have to have in their lives to make a change and live long. So bless us as we leave from this place, but never from your presence. We ask that all the people of God would say, amen.
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 Thank you.
Amen.
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 God bless all.
God bless.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.